around the lab with spiritual leaders, and if you want a map or want to know where you're going to be exactly, go to the booth there, and they're handing out maps to everyone. The next speaker here is someone who understands and who has lived the consequences of war, and later devoting himself to a path of peace, victimized by those machines of destruction. Brian is a Vietnam vet who was nearly killed here in Concord as the munition train was on the tracks going twice the speed. We all know his commitment to bringing peace, and he's here today to give us some words of encouragement and hope. Brian.
It was 34 years ago yesterday that I got back to the United States from Vietnam, where I had my wake-up call. Of course, 58 years ago when we dropped the bombs on Japan, when for the first time humanity realized it had created with its technology a weapon that could annihilate our whole species. For the first time we knew we could eliminate ourselves on the planet. For the first time in our consciousness we knew that we could not count on a continuation of life as we had known it for millions of years. But as I have studied history, I realize that the model of male-dominator, hierarchical, bureaucratic, and forced labor pool violent model goes back 6,000 or 7,000 years. And perhaps it has taken a George Bush, an unelected resident of the White House, who has unmasked the language and has eliminated the cover, any cover that we might be a redeemable society that some people might have believed up to this point. Perhaps he is like a cosmic gift in disguise that is going to enable our species, and especially our people in the United States, to realize just how awful this model is, just how destructive this model is, that we have been in for far longer than 58 years, but perhaps for 6,000 and 7,000 years. And it's time, perhaps as the people in France realized on July 14, 1789, it's time, metaphorically speaking, to storm the Bastille. It's the time for our quantum leap in our consciousness. It's the time to embrace, understand that we have to acknowledge and almost really embrace our fear and go deeper into our soul and our spirit for the courage that it takes to create, for the first time in our history in this civilization, a real people's revolution based on nonviolence and consciousness about class, so that we no longer continue to promote structures, economic and political, that repress people here and elsewhere, while we continually steal resources at gunpoint, which we've been doing our entire civilization's history. We have to understand this has been our civilization, and it must end now for a new beginning, so that we can live as a species with great dignity and enthusiasm rather than in dread and fear all the time. Let's, I think, thank George Bush, or thank the cosmic goddesses that, in a sense, gave us one more opportunity to grasp just how destructive the American way of life is, and our policies that are required to maintain this way of life, stealing other people's resources at gunpoint so we can live way beyond what is due. So thanks for being here, and let's be part of a new courage with a vision for a new world based on sustainability and love. Thank you very much.
That was Brian Wilson. And coming up next, we have David Seaborg, who's head of the Children of the Manhattan Project. He's the founder and president of the World Rainforest Fund, which is dedicated to saving the world's rainforest, and co-founder and president of the Children of Manhattan Project. He's dedicated to controlling, reducing, and ultimately eliminating nuclear weapons worldwide. Please give it up for David Seaborg.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming. They asked me to speak partly to talk a little bit about who my dad is and how I got involved. My dad is the Nobel Prize winning discoverer of plutonium. His name is Glenn Seaborg, and plutonium, of course, is the element used in nuclear weapons and nuclear reactors, and he did this work in Chicago at the Manhattan Project during the war. And of course, I was raised under him, and because he was my father, and he is the one who, serving under Kennedy, Johnson, and then Nixon as chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, became very opposed to nuclear weapons and gave us the, with the help of Kennedy and Khrushchev, the limited nuclear test ban treaty, which stopped nuclear testing in the air and put it underground. And then later, under Clinton, we got the comprehensive test ban treaty, so by treaty no more nuclear tests are allowed. And I remember being raised by him when living in Washington, D.C. They decentralized the Atomic Energy Commission, which is now the Department of Energy, and put in Germantown, Maryland, the main headquarters in case there was a nuclear war, and how they had a plan in the event of a nuclear war to take me, my 5 siblings, and my mother and father by chauffeured car out to Germantown in Maryland from our house in D.C. during this nuclear war to get to the bomb shelter there, and how I thought as a high school student how ridiculous this idea was that we would have traffic jam conditions going to Germantown, a 45-minute ride in ideal traffic with nuclear weapons flying. Obviously Germantown and Washington, D.C. would be targets, and then if we got there in the bomb shelter, we'd never get out alive anyway, and how absurd this whole thing was, and how absurd this whole arms race was and still is, because even though there is no Cold War, the arms race is still going on. Nuclear weapons are the only true weapons of mass destruction, in spite of what the Bush administration wants to tell us. They are the only weapons that can destroy all higher life on the planet, wipe out all humans and all higher life in 2 days if there is a nuclear war. They have the capacity of just 10% of the nuclear weapons are set off to destroy all of the ozone layers, so UV, ultraviolet light will come in, and further life, higher life cannot go on. We'll be left with only bacteria and protozoa. I'm an evolutionary biologist, and I work on global environmental issues like saving rainforests and global warming issues, but I'm also very concerned, and that's why I started Children of the Manhattan Project, for people who work under who are children of people who worked on the bomb, but it's open, that group, Children of the Manhattan Project, is open to anyone now, whether they had a parent that worked under the bomb, and I'm very concerned, and that's why I got involved in this. And I can see now that George Bush is taking us in a direction that's completely the wrong way to go, because mini nukes, as they're called, which by the way are a third as powerful as the Hiroshima bomb and are not mini nukes, they eliminate the distinction between conventional and nuclear weapons and greatly increase the probability of a nuclear war. We are not out of the woods just because the Cold War is over for preventing a nuclear war. Bush is trying to eliminate the test ban treaty. He has a bogus treaty with the Russians, which does not cut back nuclear weapons at all. He is developing a whole new generation of nuclear weapons. I have a button that says Bush lost because he never won the election. He's not even in there legitimately. We must make it, for world peace, a highest priority, get rid of George Bush and to eliminate nuclear weapons from the face of the earth. They are very, very dangerous. Thank you for your attention.
Energy here, human energy. We don't need nuclear energy when we have human energy, and we have that here today. The next person here is They're going to speak to you. She's been involved in this movement for years, if not decades. She has brought to the Tri-Valley Care program 19 years of in-depth research writing and facilitating public participation in discussions regarding the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and the U.S. Department of Energy's nuclear weapons complex. She is executive director at Tri-Valley Cares and one of the group's founding members in 1983. She serves on the board of the National Back from the Brink campaign to take nuclear weapons off hair trigger alert. Please give it up for Marilia Kelly.
Hi, and welcome to Livermore. Welcome to my community. As most of you know, if you look a little bit to the south, that's where I live. Tri-Valley Cares, which stands for Communities Against a Radioactive Environment, is celebrating, actually right now, we're going into our 20th year. So to all the Tri-Valley Cares folks who are here, congratulations on hanging in. I also want us to take a moment and to look at each other. I see young people here. I see students here from University of California campuses, and as you know, the University of California manages Livermore Lab. I see folks here in their 30s, 40s, 50s. I see grandmothers. I see clergy. I see laity. I see all kinds of people. And together, we are making a difference. It is fitting that we are here today, now, at Livermore. And I'm just going to take my minute to tell you a few reasons why it is important that we gather here now. It's important that we gather here now because weaponeers at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory are modifying the B-83 laydown bomb to become a, quote, robust nuclear earth penetrator, end quote. A laydown bomb means the plane drops the bomb and there's a slight moment while the plane gets out of the way before it detonates. They're trying to modify it so that we'll burrow into Mother Earth and then detonate. This is a high-yield nuclear weapon. The B-83 has a top yield of over a megaton. It's the biggest nuclear weapon in the arsenal. In addition, weaponeers at Livermore Lab now are developing and doing research toward the development, to be precise, of mini-nukes. These are nuclear weapons with yields of less than 5 kilotons. As was said before, maybe a third of a Hiroshima. Some of these are being designed to also burrow into the earth and detonate. Also, right now, as we gather here, Congress is not only debating when they come back from the August recess, so the decisions are going to be made in September, they're not only debating the budget for the robust nuclear earth penetrator and for the, quote, advanced concept teams that are working on these mini-nukes, but they're also debating whether or not to give $25 million for enhanced readiness to conduct a full-scale nuclear test in Nevada. Right now, we're in a public comment period on a Department of Energy plan to build a new plutonium pit factory. What's a pit? It is the plutonium core of a modern nuclear weapon, called a pit because it sits inside the bomb the way a peach pit sits inside a peach. This new factory, if they go forward and build it, will be able to produce upwards of 500 new plutonium pits every year. These are pits that are for new and modified nuclear weapons. This is a path that will lead us ultimately toward the use of nuclear weapons again in combat. The one nation that has used nuclear weapons in anger, in war, the United States, at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, August 6th and 9th respectively, which we're here to commemorate, is on a path which I believe, if it is not stopped, will lead toward another use by the United States of a nuclear weapon in war. So what we're doing here today is solemn. What we're doing here today is also joyful. Look around. Look at the people next to you. We are standing here in joy, for peace. We not only know what we're saying no to, we know what we're saying yes to. We're saying yes to a world where no child needs to live with the scourge of nuclear weapons, nuclear proliferation, and the scourge of nuclear war hanging over their head. We're here to say yes to a society that spends its money on education, on libraries, on childcare, on health care, and not on armaments of mass destruction. We're here to say yes, in which we can hold hands like brothers and sisters across all boundaries all around the world and live together and have the power that comes from empowerment and not from domination. We're here to say yes to those things. So we know why we're here. We know how important it is. We know that this mission is sacred. So I just want to say thank you, and I want to say one final thing. I understand my president has a number of my brothers and sisters over in Iraq looking for weapons of mass destruction. If my president had just called me, I could have told him where he could find weapons of mass destruction. And today we're going to surround them with our positive energy for peace. We're going to send a message to the lab, to Congress, and to the world. Thank you for being here.
Yes. Our next speaker here is Reverend Alan Senuke, and former International Director of the Buddhist Peace Fellowship Zen Center in Berkeley. He continues to work as a senior advisor on social activist issues around national, international issues here in the country, dealing with peace, human rights, structural violence, and the development of socially engaged Buddhism. Please give it up for Alan and the message of peace.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored to be here this afternoon. I invite you all to just take a moment of silence and take a couple of breaths that we can enjoy together. Actually, we always have time to do this, to just stop for a moment and recollect ourselves with our friends, with our families. The Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh expresses Buddhism's first grave precept this way: aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of life, I vow to cultivate compassion and learn ways to protect lives of people, animals, plants, and minerals. I am determined not to kill, not to let others kill, and not to condone any killing in the world, in my thinking, and in my way of life. So in this world gone mad, our nation will spend $399 billion on defense next year, more than the combined defense budgets of the next 20 largest nations put together. That's a really kind of startling fact. $6 billion plus of this budget will go directly to fund nuclear weapons. This is more than was spent during any 1 year of the Cold War, the so-called Cold War, and that supposedly ended 10 years ago. But in a world gone sane, countless thousands of us in many countries speak out against the destruction of war and the calculated madness of nuclear weapons. Beyond madness and sanity is true peace. Sanity and madness are intimately related, but they are not the full expression of spiritual life. Peace arises when we look deeply into ourselves and realize the uncomfortable truth that our way of life, yours and mine, actually create the conditions for war. More uncomfortably, we have to recognize that within each of us is that same capacity for destruction as our opponents and our enemies. And in turn, that the weapon makers, those 700 PhDs across the way, have to look at themselves and understand that they have a crucial role in creating peace. When all of us can take full responsibility for ourselves and each other, then we experience true peace, peace beyond madness and sanity, peace in all of its dynamism. Between us and the lab are steel fences and high walls. But the real barriers are between people. Again, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, we inter-are. And this vision of interbeing leads us to meet our so-called enemies with compassion and patience. Even in the midst of conflict and disagreement, may we see each other completely as brother and sister, father and mother, as Buddhas. When at last we realize this, then no thought of killing arises. No weapons are designed and built. Our man-forged manacles fall away, and we can breathe freely again. So I'll close with words from Martin Luther King, who's already been cited and spoken here on this stage. This is from his Nobel Prize acceptance speech, which was spoken almost 40 years ago and is still fresh and compelling. Martin Luther King said, "I refuse to accept the cynical notion that nation after nation must spiral down a militaristic stairway into the hell of nuclear annihilation. I believe that even amid today's mortar bursts and whining bullets, there is still hope for a brighter tomorrow. I still believe that one day mankind will be crowned triumphant over war and bloodshed." Thank you very much, and go in peace.